Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bikini and the Brain podcast with the lovely Ashley Kaltwasser.
He loves to use the sound.
That's never going to get old. That's the only sound on the soundboard that I use. And me, Adam.
Woo.
So, you know what, Ashley? You know what? This podcast is stressing me out.
Is it?
It is.
Oh, what you gonna do about it?
I think we should discuss it today.
Okay. Okay, let's talk through this.
So today's topic is going to be about the effects of stress on the body. Mm-hmm. And Ashley is, I would say, a pretty good expert at dealing with, the contest prep stresses that come with it, the travels, the this, the that's. And I think, we've got some interesting things to discuss for you, the science behind the stress of what it does to your body too, and bodybuilding and all that too. So I think it's going to be a fun one.
Definitely. I would say, me personally, I don't think I get stressed out too often. I think my life for the most part is pretty stress free. I think there are a few things that do stress me out in my life. And that's usually if I travel too much or if I'm out of my routine for too long, it kind of stresses me out a little bit. I'm one of those people that I need a few days to recover sometimes, just to not do anything, but just stay at home in my pajamas, in my glasses, and my sloppy bun, and do house chores or something. And just kind of I don't know. I'm kind of in a sense, I'm kind of a loner in some aspects. I like to have alone time and just where I'm not interacting with a lot of people, So that's kind of how I deal with stress when I do have it. But, I think it's important to realize there's also good stress and bad stress, but we'll get into that in a bit. But I want to know, Adam, what stresses you out?
You know what? I think that you can set up your life to be stressful or not be stressful. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of set my life up to not be stressful anymore.
Yeah.
I think when I was younger and I was doing this for more of a living, it was more stressful. But now that I've kind of passed that point of having to do it for a living and now I just do it because I love it, it really eliminated a lot of my stress. I think that was a big part of it. And it was when I was working at 24-hour fitness and training and just hoping to cover my mortgage and things like that. And then, it took a little bit of the joy away from it too, because it really was, it's paying your bills and you get to think about other things. So I think, that, and then also I've eliminated any stressful people in my life too. If I have even if I have someone who's really, really just they're just a stress ball client, I'm hey, I don't do this for that reason. I'm not that guy. We're going to do this. We're going to have fun and we're not going to be stressed about it because we know we can only control the controllables. And I'll eliminate myself from that scenario or eliminate myself from stressful people that are always that, everyone has that, or I used to, but I don't have them anymore. But had that friend that's all they are is drama.
Yeah.
All they do is complain. They never see the glass is always half empty. They're always arguing. They're always fighting. They're always something. Right. And I'm dude, that's not my jam, man. I'm chill. I'm that guy that's you see those old hippie dudes that are always high on weed and they're just no, man, I'm chill, but I just do it without the weed.
Yeah.
I do it without, I'm just no, man, that's not my jam, bro. I'm just in my corner doing my thing. And it's always how I run my prep business. I don't pay attention to the other side of things. I'm just if they're not my athletes, I probably don't know them too much unless I did a bikini review. And that's when I just don't care,
Right.
I think that's important too, to not let yourself get overly involved in those things and eliminate those people from your life too that are just causing nothing but negative in your life,
Mm-hmm. I do feel you probably, I would expect you to have some stress because you're an owner of a company and you're the boss to the employees. Whereas me, I'm only I have minimal responsibility in my life, which is good. I kind of set my life up to be that way. Yeah. Like I said, that's why I don't even have pets. I don't even want that responsibility. I just want to account for myself. And, I do have some clients, but it's a different level where you actually kind of, take care of the employees and make sure your business is running accordingly. You know
what? The thing is, with me, and this is kind of funny because I talked to some of the staff of Patrick Bet David. We talked for a little while about it, and I'm not really it's funny because everyone sees me now and they're like, oh, you're like this entrepreneur, this fitness guy. And I'm like, no, I'm they gave me this term, an accidental entrepreneur, right? I never wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I just started dealing with the growth that naturally, organically occurred. And then as it started growing so much at one point, I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't want to be that big. I never wanted to be that big. I never wanted all of that. It just was like a fun thing to keep doing and keep growing. And so because it happened that way, instead of me like putting my foot on the gas and being like, gotta grow, gotta get bigger, gotta make more money, like because it just kind of happened, I think like you'll notice all of our team is very, very similar. Like all of our coaches are very similar. We're all just like happy, not super stressed people. And my job now is just like keep it where it's at, but I don't want to grow it anymore. I don't want, I don't want 30 coaches. The quality control goes down when it gets that big. Like I want it to just be this like family that we have here. And so I think because of that, and we're not trying to push it, even though we could probably be 50% bigger by the end of the year, end of next year, if I really wanted it to be. But why? Like we don't, you know what I mean? Everyone's happy. Everyone's making good money. Everyone's loving their job. No one here is like saying no one's disgruntled. Everyone's happy. So it's like when you get in that, you put yourself in that position, you can choose to stress yourself out. I can choose to grow and stress and call every coach every day. You need to do this and whatever, start forcing people to do sales. Like, you know what I mean? But but because you don't, I also want to live as long as I can. And I know that the more I do those things, it's going to have a direct impact on my longevity.
Right.
And so for me, my only stress is like if it gets really slow. So like the time I had stress was the last stressful time I had was like 2020 when they were saying, you have to close the gym and they're raising the taxes and the cops were coming and thing and I'm trying to keep it open. That was the only like stressful time. And I think like politically it sucked me in a little bit too because of that had a lot of effect on like business owners like me. And so then I like eliminated myself from that because it was just adding nothing but stress to my life and I couldn't control it. And so that was, I think being aware of it is a problem too. Like, because I was like, I want to keep my gym open. I want to keep this. I want to like fight for what's right and all this. But then in the end, you really can't do anything. You just, right. So like, but it could suck you in, And so you have to be aware too. Like these things can suck you in. Your friends can suck you negative. Like you can be so much stress on your company that it makes it not fun anymore. And then it steals the joy. So for me now, I've just kind of faced the facts that I want to live and I want to enjoy this. And if it gets too big, you don't. It turns into work, and I never want it to turn into work again. And so I'm in a spot where I can eliminate my stress because of that. But it's taken, I did stress out for in my 20s and a little bit in my 30s where I could get to this point. I think that's how it's supposed to be. 20s, you're supposed to grind. 20s, you're supposed to grind, do whatever you do, create a little nest egg. 30s, you're supposed to already know what you're supposed to be doing and then build that nest egg up. And then 40, you're supposed to kind of be on cruise control. And then 50, you're like completely, I don't know what happens at 50, but from what I'm told, it's like, you're just like, you're really taking it easy, So, but yeah, so I don't know. I just kind of, I evaluate that all the time and see what the cost benefit analysis is. If it ever gets slow to the point where the coaches are not having enough like clients or something, then I will probably stress out. But because we're not growing, it doesn't really run into that problem. We run into the opposite problem where it's like, oh, we're getting to the point where we have to start turning people down or hire more coaches. And I'm like, I don't want to hire more coaches. So everyone's happy,
Yeah. Well, you picked a good bunch.
Our team is good, right?
Yeah,
the coaches are
all on the same page. Just like you said, we have like the same mindset, I think.
Yeah. Even like, I would say, so the newest one here, oh gosh, is it really that? Nikki would probably be the newest one. Yeah. Newest coach here. So even her, she's like, man, everyone's just so nice and welcoming. But she's over a year. So I met Kimber then. So like, everyone's just so welcoming. It's such a good family unit. There's no fighting in between. There's none of this and no, she's like other teams. There's like that rivalries and fighting and this, why did she get this client? Why did she get that? And I'm like, no, we don't, none of that would happen here. Like you guys would be God, like no stress here. Like no one's going to, so it's, the people you surround yourself with,
Exactly.
Like Arthur's killing it on the video over here and he's super happy. Yeah. So it's like the people you pick. I will say this. I don't think I've never supposed to have been like, I never was intended to be a boss. I don't think, in that role. And that's why Tori does a really good job at that, like more stern role. I'm like the creator and I'm really good at finding talent. That's what I'm good at. I can see someone and be like, there's someone in that person that we can use. Like,
I will say when Sassy Adam, though, I don't know if you guys ever experienced Sassy Adam, but no, nothing to do with Sassy.
Nothing to do with Sasquatch.
Sasquatch. But every once in a while, Adam will get pretty stern.
Once in a while.
And stand his ground. And better stay out of the way.
They say you take the boy out the hood, you can't take the hood out the boy.
Something like that. So I mean, I've seen it. It's a rare occasion.
It's very rare, especially now. I don't think I'll see any of those occurrences for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, okay, so setting yourself up for stress, right? And I think, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but one of the things that you can set yourself up for to not being stressful in the off season, right? Is it to have a good to have a good off season means you're gonna have a less stressful in season.
Yes.
And I think that when we talk about stress, we have to talk about the things that people associate stress with, which is obviously like everyone's like, oh, cortisol, right? It's the devil hormone, right? Like it makes me fat, and it's like not really. That's not the direct result of that, But stress is a natural human response. But the thing is, our stress now is different than our stress how it's designed for us. So like before, you got to understand, and I always talk about, evolution and what our life is now. And we've progressed so fast technologically that there's no way our bodies have, evolved to the point of our comforts that we have, right? So when we think about the things that we would have to stress about before, a lot of them were for survival reasons, like I always say, oh, you're running from a bear, right? Like that's like my joke, but like legit, you're running from a bear and, saber-toothed tigers like hundreds of years ago, right? Thousands of years ago. So like that's what it's designed for. It's like, okay, I'm stressed out because something life-threatening or of some type or really stressful is happening because we didn't have someone leaving negative comments on our Instagram, right? To stress us out. We didn't have shows where I placed second when I should have placed first, and all my friends said I should have placed first, so I should have placed first, right? We didn't have these things. We had like survival, right? And we're talking just a couple hundred years ago. And when we talk about a couple hundred years ago, it seems like it's a really long time to evolve. But if you look back like 200 years, you're like a few people from that, and I always say that, every person lives like, 70, 80 years, 90 years sometimes, right? So like a couple hundred years is like 3 people, it's not a lot of evolution in that time frame. Everyone thinks, they think in like 10-year periods, they think like decade. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, that's like 20 people 200 years ago. I'm like, no, it's like people don't have kids, so they're like 30, So like that's, every 100 years is like 3 people of evolution, right? So we're not ready for the technology we have right now, right? So before we get stressed from literally life or death situations, we're running from a bear, cortisol rises, boom, right? What does cortisol do? It basically dumps glucose into your bloodstream, right? So dumps glucose into your bloodstream so you can use it as instant energy, right? So your body's like, okay, this guy's running from a bear. Boom, adrenaline burst, right? Heart rate goes up, glucose dump from the cortisol levels, but then the cortisol also blocks insulin, right? So it blocks insulin, and that's where the issue becomes in, right? So, all right, back to the scenario, running from a bear. Glucose is in the system, right, at a high amount, so your body can run from that bear and have that instant energy to run from that bear. What insulin does, insulin basically drives nutrients to cells. In the case of glucose, it drives cells, glucose stores it as glycogen in muscle cells, and it also can convert it, store it into fat, right? So, but insulin's blocked when cortisol is released, so you have this huge dump of glucose in the bloodstream, but now, and you're running from the bear, so you run away because you have that energy, right? Without it, you wouldn't have that instant energy to get away and be alive. So it's life or death, right? Fight or flight. Now, today's day and age, well, I'm stressed out because Susie Q said I was fat on stage on my Instagram, who has 0 followers and 0 posts with the, right? But even though 100 people said positive things, that one negative one's one we focus on, right? So she said I was fat, right? Or whatever happened, or my car didn't start, whatever, right? Our stresses are different now, and but what happens when that stress happens, right? The same things occur, right? Cortisol rises, glucose drops, insulin's blocked, but I'm not using any energy because I'm sitting in a chair looking at my phone, right? Now, running from getting in the situation where you're running from a bear or whatever, right? That's a rare occurrence, even back then, very rare occurrence. Susie Q leaving an Instagram post or daily stresses in our lives now is a very common occurrence, right? So our body still has not deciphered the difference to some capacity. Obviously, there's a variable of how much it's going to release, and your adrenaline dumping, right, is different because it becomes more normal, right? So we're having a lot more frequent cortisol, right, elevations and a lot more dumps of glucose in the bloodstream and a lot higher insulin being blocked. So you're constantly having this like glucose in your blood system all the time that you're not instantly needing it, right? You're just sitting down in your stress. And it's just like, maybe it's at a lower level, but it's still happening. And so when that happens, all these other negative things happen. You have all this energy that's always supposed to be used. You have insulin that's constantly being blocked. And that's when you kind of develop, that's when they, you hear about insulin resistance. That's kind of what it is. And so what happens with this is everyone's like, well, okay, well, how does this affect bodybuilding, me being stressed out? Well, think about that scenario. You constantly have glucose in the bloodstream, your insulin's being blocked. What happens when you have your cells depleted of glycogen, right? Your body recognizes the signals that your cells are depleted of glycogen because all those carbs are being dumped because cortisol keeps raising and dumping those calories basically out of the cell in a simple form, right? Dumping the glucose out of the cell. So what happens? Well, the body says, hey, I'm depleted, right? Because you have the glucose in the bloodstream. So it says, what does that mean? Well, I'm hungry. I need to feed those cells because you're not uptaking those cells, the glucose back in, right? Because the insulin's being blocked. So now all of a sudden you have ample energy in the bloodstream. Your insulin's not storing the energy. You're not using the energy and your body's really, really hungry, even though there's ample energy available, right? That is a huge problem for storing body fat and eating more calories and never being satiated and always being hungry no matter what, right? So that's where bodybuilding kind of becomes a problem. There's multiple problems. That's just one of like hundreds.
So what you're saying is basically, although you might be super stressed, you still have some control. And that's whether to eat that extra food or not. Even though you might feel more hungry, it's something you kind of have to mentally push. You got to push through, right?
Yeah.
If I'm reading or listening.
Yeah, it's hard because this is one of those podcasts where it was like, Ash was like, this is going to be a technical one, and you'll have to. And the problem is when you go into these technical ones, this one especially, it's like you want to make it layman's terms, right? You want to make it as easy as possible to understand. But the reality is you're playing 5D chess, right? You've been very good at playing 5D chess. Most people, and I'm not like bashing anyone, but most people are going to play 1-move chess. You're playing 5-move chess, right? So when most people get in this situation, they just think of the stress. Oh, I'm behind in my prep. I need to catch up. I need to do 2 hours of cardio, 3 hours of cardio, not eat any food. Am I going to get in shape for the show? My job's stressing me out. And then they're not losing weight, right? They're in a situation, they've dug themselves this hole, and the stress is making it harder now, right? Mm-hmm. You're playing 5D chess, right? You've thought about this ahead of time. I'm going to be prepared for that situation so I don't have all this fat to lose. I'm not going to eat no calories. I'm not going to eat crazy calories and everything I want to eat in the off season. That way, when I get in season, I have an easier prep and I'm not stressed out, right? You checked in today. You're at your stage weight. I think that we're obviously going to be a little leaner come showtime for the Olympia, but you checked in today at 122, right? Like you're 5 weeks out from the Olympia. Friday's 5 weeks out, right? So like
Saturday.
so that is, that's a perfect example, right?
So then so just to clarify, then you can even if you don't go over in your calories, you can put on body fat because the cells, or the calories go outside. You'd
still need to eat a surplus of calories.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to clarify, because I think a lot of people would use that more as an excuse, like as if it happens within the span of hours, right? Like, oh, something happened and they're about to go on stage, but they don't look lean enough or whatever. And it might, something happened that stressed me out. Whereas maybe it could be more so messing with their head, maybe their routine, but not necessarily like, it's not like you just puff up all of a sudden. It basically is what I'm trying to say.
I think the confusion would come from that would be, cause that's actually a good point. So it wouldn't be true fat calorie based, right?
Yeah.
It would be more how I look, right? Uh-huh. You're more watery because you're more stressed.
There we go.
Your waistline is bigger because of if you have too much, like if you have a constant dump of cortisol, it actually, there's another part of it, and this is what it actually affects bodybuilding too. So the intestinal system, that's the most vascular area of your body, right? So you have the most blood flow to the vascular system, right? To the intestinal system. So if you are having high levels of cortisol, you actually will impact the amount of blood flow the intestinal system gets, right?
Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah,
Okay,
so that
I'm learning
affects
some stuff.
Yeah, right. So that affects nutrient absorption, that affects digestion, and so when you have less blood flow, less natural movement of your bowels, you have less digestion, and we're eating all this protein and not eating that many carbs, which is harder to digest, especially without the carbs and vegetables, right? Without the extra calories. Well, now what happens? Well, now you're having more likelihood to have irritable bowel syndrome. You're having slower bowel movements, and what happens with that, right? Well, you're having you're having worse digestion. You're having a bigger waistline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're holding more water because you're more stressed, and now your waistline's not going down, so you're more stressed. And then what happens? Oh, all of a sudden I'm fatter, right? You're not fatter. You're more watery. You're more inflamed. You have digestive issues. And that's how people would confuse the two, right?
Yes. Okay. I think that's a very common, I guess, thing, and it makes sense how you're saying it.
Yeah.
But it's not like instant fat deposited,
Yeah.
It's more of like these other factors. Plus also whenever you're stressed, you're usually more pessimistic and you're automatically going to think you look worse than you do. I mean, I find myself maybe not like when I'm stressed, but like if I'm cranky one day, maybe I didn't sleep enough, I could look the same one day as the next. But since I'm in such a pessimistic and grumpy mood, I think I look way worse than I do. And then the next day when I sleep and I look the same, I'm like, oh no, I look great, And I think it's sometimes that mindset that's kind of playing tricks with you as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think cortisol's gotten a really bad rap, but it's, it's important. It's an important tool. Obviously you can see it's an important tool for blood glucose regulation, right? So we need it. It's actually one of the reasons we wake up in the morning. When you exercise, you release cortisol. There's a lot of benefit to cortisol, but what we're talking about is constantly elevated cortisol, which is a part of having a very high stress life, right? It's hard on and that also it's hard on the heart. There's you're having a constant adrenaline dumps, things like that. So it's harder on the adrenal glands, right? So that's where it's released from. So you're having it's just a multitude of things that I think that a lot of times. I mean, you get it a little bit, but I get villainized all the time for he's always so mean about off season. And it's always by the people who are not doing good in the off season. And I'm like, you guys, there's a multitude of reasons besides me having an easier job of getting you in shape for your show than this. It's all these things that we're talking about that the stress causes that we can't eliminate. And it's funny is that there's so many examples of the stress and people not making progress. And I've used this example before. But if you're a coach and you have any clients that are like CPAs, so basically people who do taxes and stuff, and the tax season deadline comes around, I will promise you, so pay attention to those clients. I promise you, the last 3 weeks before taxes are due, they will not make progress. It's like very little progress if they make any, right? And I was like, I used to see this and I was like, this is weird. And then I started seeing, because over the years, I've done this 20 years. So I've worked with a lot of everything, right? But when that happened, so for example, when COVID first hit, nurses were their progress stopped, right? Because they're stressed as shit, right? So CPAs every year, tax season, I'm like, let's just try to get through it type of thing, right? It's almost like when you see people go on a vacation and you're like, I know you're going to eat bad. Let's just try to be net zero. Let's not try to gain any weight or gain a pound and not go too far off, right? It's kind of like that during tax season. It's just constant, it was just a constant thing. And it was like, wow, that's really weird. For example, another example would be, Kimber the other day, she was going home and she had a stressful situation before, that week, she had a stressful situation. I was like, let's give you a dieting week before you go home so you can enjoy your mom's cooking, this and that. She gained 4 pounds on a dieting week, doing more cardio, less calories. There's no scientific reason why that would happen, right? But she was stressed out, right? Yeah. So those things happen all the time. And I'm telling you guys, if you're, I don't want to make it put this pressure on you, but Ashley's, the Olympia is always going to be stressful no matter what.
Yes.
But Ashley's ahead of the game, and she's at least doing that part where she's not worried about making it well, you're probably still worried, but at least you're less worried.
The Olympia is, it's next level. I'm always thinking about, am I going to be ready? Yeah,
but at least you've today your weight is about where it should be, and you're ahead, and you don't have to worry about, dang, I need to lose 15 pounds to get ready in the next 5. You know what I mean? So at least you've done that part. And that's one thing you guys can do about your stress. And stress is it's a tough one because it's I can use that example. I'm people are stress, and you're okay, then don't stress, right? It's
it's be happy. It's
if I say to you, hey, Ashley, don't think about elephants.
Yeah, I know. It makes it worse. It's like,
what are you going to think about?
It's so frustrating. Yeah. It's like some things you just can't control like that, you know? And I think another point to bring up as well is depending on where the stress is coming from. Like, let's say the stress is caused something by nothing to do with like fitness or a competition that's coming up or whatever. It's caused by work. You know, I think too is like, the intensity in the gym isn't the same because your mind is elsewhere. You can't concentrate on the lifts because you're worried about other things, which is it adds on to the making minimal, if any, progress during, you know, the times you should be making progress. Slows things down. Just because you're just distracted, your mind isn't clear and you're worried about other things, and fitness might be the last thing on your mind.
Yeah. And that's another thing that, and I don't want to like, give cortisol the worst name here, but it is responsible for a lot of negative things, but also a lot of positive things. But another negative thing that it's responsible for, which in turn is, you know, designed to be a positive thing, is this process called gluconeogenesis, which is essentially changing stored amino acids. So basically skeletal muscle, stored amino acids, and converting those to glucose. So through gluconeogenesis, basically taking amino acid, converting it to glucose. And that process, gluconeogenesis, is why you don't need carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are not an essential macronutrient. So, you know, amino acids, you have essential amino acids, you have essential fats, but you don't have there's no such thing as essential carbohydrates. So they're not necessary in the body because your body can make them, right? So there's no such, so you can live carb-free for the rest of your life. Is it optimal? No. Is it ideal? Probably not. But can you do it? Yes. And can you adapt to a high amount of that? Yes. You know, so very, very, it's important to get that distinction. So cortisol is also partly responsible for that. So basically, again, running from a bear, the body needs to instantly get as much glucose as possible. One of the processes it can do that. At that time, the body of extreme stresses and common stresses, the body is not concerned with building more muscle and making it harder for you to survive. It's trying to get you to survive. So more muscle is generally, in the body's way of thinking, is less likely to survive, right? If you have all this muscle, it's harder to move it. It takes more energy to store it. It takes up a lot of energy throughout the day. So the first thing the body's going to usually try to get rid of would be that in those scenarios of like extremes, right? So because it's unnecessary, especially the amount of muscle that bodybuilders and bikini competitors have, it's more than their base. So, you know, it's in excess, you know, it's you having a lot of extra muscle. It's like a billionaire buying a car, right? It's like, I got so much money to go buy a car. So you have a lot of excess muscle. Your body wants to use extra energy. You can just convert some of it and use it as energies, right? So when you're in, let's say, extreme stresses and you're really stressing your body out, you got behind in your prep, I've heard of a lot of girls doing 3 hours of cardio this season for some reason. 3 hours.
What the heck?
Dude.
Oh my gosh.
Seriously.
I can't even, I think, I can't wrap my mind around that.
That would be one of those moments you'd be like, well, let's just not do this.
You know what? Let's just.
We have this joke going with Ashley where we'll like change her carbs or something. And she was like, let's just not even.
I'm going to tell you the origin of this joke. So when I got back from the Arnold UK, okay, and this was when I came back and I was way too small. Like I shrank. I did the opposite of rebound. I did like a reverse rebound. I thought I was going to come back all fluffy and puffy from the travel, from not working out as much, from the extra carbs around show day and stuff, right? So I came back and I was all like cranky and tired from traveling. And I did my check-in with Adam, and Adam was concerned because he thought I was way too small. And I was teeny tiny, way lean. And he's like, Ashley, I know you don't want to, but we're going to have to do the, what's it called? The intra-workout carbs, which is basically like a carb beverage, right? And I have this thing, I will never drink my carbs or sugar. You know, I think it's such a waste of carbs. Like, you know, I'd rather eat my carbs. But he was like worried I wasn't going to get enough carbs in me by the time I was going to compete again, which the reason why we were doing it so rushed is because I had a show in less than a week from the time of stepping off stage at the Arnold. So, yeah. So it was like an emergency. We need to get emergency carbs. And I was just so not about that idea. I was like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't compete next weekend. It's okay. It's not worth it.
She even like sat back in her chair like.
I was dead serious too. I was so cranky. I was like, you know what? Let's just not do
I
this.
was like, let her have this. She rarely does it. I was like, that was so funny.
So then
I still remember that moment.
And then we just negotiated to edible carbs instead. Like, and then once it was like edible carbs, I'm like, okay, I can compete again. I was dead serious. I was so cranky and jet lagged. I was just like, I was being so dramatic.
It was only like once this year though. So it was a good year. It was a good year.
And now it just became a joke.
Now it's like, let's just not even.
You tried to take away my protein bar last week, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just not compete at the Olympia. It's okay. But then I got to keep my protein bar.
We got to keep the protein. She has these threats. No, so
you know what? I'm just gonna quit the team. Taking away my first meal. I'm just gonna quit the team. I'm just gonna retire.
That's so funny. So drama, dude. So drama. So funny.
So now it's a joke.
Now it's an ongoing joke. But yeah, at 3 hours of cardio, I would probably quit.
I think like, I mean, I just ran a 10K race yesterday. Okay. And that took less than an hour for sure. I can't imagine just doing 3 hours of cardio unless it's like a walking cardio. But that's so boring.
Yeah.
So boring. Like, I would lose my attention span. Like, okay, let's do something else.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest, to take away that much of someone's daily life. How do you expect them to keep going for a career, you know, and then competing, you know, as a pro, you know, to get some momentum as a pro, you usually got to compete, you know, 5-6 times in a year. So it's like, you expect her to do that all year long. How is she going to have any other life? That's not including the workout. So you got to get to the gym, get home from the gym. You got to obviously shower because you're doing 3 hours of cardio. You can't do 3 hours of cardio in one session. So what is that even? So what are you doing? I don't even know how they'd structure it. 2 1.5 hour cardio sessions. So it's like, you know, it's going to kill your workout. So let's even do the math on that. Okay. So 2 sessions of cardio, 1 session of gym. We're talking getting to the gym on top of that. So we have 3 trips to the gym. Let's say it's 10 minutes each time because it's close, right? That's 20 minutes both ways. So we're talking 5 hours of committed time to the gym if your workout's an hour a day on top of that, right? That's crazy town. Like, who's going to do this forever like that? And then that's going to be extra stress, right? Because now you're not having a life and your boyfriend's like, I never see you anymore. And then, right? And then, you know, you're definitely wasting more muscle at that point because your calories are probably really low because they're not taking a science-based approach to keeping you as the highest calories, lowest cardio possible. So it doesn't, you know, so yeah, it's just that's a mess, man. But it's been a common thing. I keep hearing about it. And I'm like, and some of these girls are posting it with like proudness, you know, that they're doing it.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I wouldn't be proud of that. See, this is where I say, because you say sometimes, Asha, you're the hardest worker I know. And I will tell you, I will never do that. I like to think I'm a smart, I work out smarter, not harder. Like, I will never do that. Like, you know, so I would have to give it to those girls that do the 3 hours cardio. Although it's not smart, they're definitely working harder. It's just not smarter. It's not smart at all.
The dedication on that is pretty extreme.
Here's the thing, though. That dedication lasts, what, like a month?
It is.
And then those are the ones you'll see just like go off the rails.
Yeah, they blow up offstage. Well, also because when we talk about, so I'm big on, you know, get someone right up to maintenance calories right after a show, right? But people don't understand what I mean by that. Whatever the current maintenance calories are, not where you started, because where you started is going to be different, you know? So now if you have someone who's in that situation, right? Their body is really, you know, exactly what we're talking about, is really stressed out. Calories are super low, you know, cortisol is probably through the roof. Cardio expenditure is crazy through the roof, right? So their new like maintenance calories is so adapted to that extreme for survival, right? That when they come out of it, that if you can't maintain the way it took you to get lean, you're not going to maintain you being that lean. So if you can't maintain the method of which it took to get you that lean, you can't stay that lean, right? So if that makes sense. So if it takes you 3 hours of cardio and 800 calories to get in shape, good luck maintaining that for the rest of your life. You have to eventually come out of that, right? So how do you come out of that? Well, your new calories set point, right? Your norm now after, let's say, 8 weeks of 3 hours of cardio, your norm now is that's your normal cardio expenditure. So good luck in your future preps trying to get in stage shape with doing 20 minutes of cardio, right? I'll get that question a lot. I'll get people that are like, yeah, I want to try to do it this way. I want to at least give my body the chance of doing like a higher calorie, lower cardio prep. And I want to do like it's right now, like I want to do the Arnold, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, you just finished doing 3 hours of cardio a couple of weeks ago, and you want to get in shape now after you gained back 20 pounds doing 20 minutes of cardio. Like, do you think that's going to happen? Your body's not even going to recognize the 20 minutes of cardio because it's used to the 3 hours of cardio, right? So like how you set yourself up, the 5D chess we talk about, is going to obviously make it less stressful for you, not run into these situations less. So it's a kind of a tricky thing. You know, when you come out of the show, you have to go to your newfound maintenance calories, and you have to reverse all that and desensitize yourself to all that crazy cardio expenditure that you're doing before, you know? So I do think if you go through multiple preps like that, you do make it future preps harder because that's your body's natural set point at that point. And your body becomes super regular, super used to doing that much cardio. So now when you do an hour of cardio, it really doesn't do anything because 1 hour cardio is 50% less than 2 hours of cardio, which is 66% less than 3 hours of cardio, right? Yeah. And now you're like, okay, go get in shape. Like if I were to take you right now, let's say you're doing, well, you're not doing that. But let's say you're doing 30 minutes of cardio 5 times a week. And I'm like, okay, Ashley, go get in shape now doing 10 minutes of cardio 5 days a week. Like you'd be like, that's not going to do anything for me. Your body's going to think the same thing, right? So it's like, so you run into these problems with that situation, and it becomes very, very stressful. It makes the preps harder, right?
Absolutely. And that's why I always say in this sport, it's not smart to be too good at cardio. This isn't a performance-based sport, I guess, unless you're fitness, but we're not going to count that. But it is not a performance-based sport. So we don't want to be too good at cardio. I mean, even for me, I think a lot of people get confused because I'll post about doing like 10K races and stuff sometimes. And, you know, I just ran one last weekend. But the thing is, I don't train for them. I just do them. Okay. I don't practice. I don't train for long distance because I don't want to be too good at cardio, because then I'll be in that scenario where like, okay, you know, 20 minutes becomes 30 minutes, that becomes 40, and then 50, and then an hour, and then so and so and so on. So it's okay to shock your body every once in a while, like I did last weekend, but to purposely train like that is not smart for our sport, which is why it's really difficult if you have clients that are like marathoners and stuff. It's difficult to give them cardio because it's like they're so adapted to it that you have to find these other little ways of doing it. But it's not ideal, that's for sure. Yeah,
it's definitely it's not the most thought out approach, because just like exercise, there's like volume versus intensity. And if you work at an extreme intensity, you can decrease your volume. If you work at a very low intensity, you can have an extreme volume, right? So that's kind of the same thing. So if you're doing, you know, low intensity, steady state cardio, yeah, in theory, that's going to be doable, right? The problem that we run into, you got to like look at the science behind it too and really analyze it. So the reason people think that steady state cardio is like the best form of cardio is because you can look at how your body uses fat the easiest. So at rest, your body uses most fat, like the highest percentage of your calories used while you're sleeping is like during sleep. So when you're at the lowest resting heart rate, the slowest pace, your body has the easiest ability to use fat as energy, right? It can oxidize energy at the rate necessary basically to kind of survive off of that. So, but when you're moving faster, there's no way for your body to free up a fat cell, convert it, use it as energy, like during that period. The percentage goes down significantly of how much fat is being used during that time frame, the faster you move, right? So people look at that and they're like, oh, well, that means that when I do steady state cardio, I burn the most fat. Yeah, technically you burn the most fat. It's a nominal difference between if you were to do, instead of 3 hours of cardio, do an hour of cardio at a higher pace. They both burn the same amount of calories. One is going to burn a little bit more body fat because it's easier to use fat at that rate than it would be at the 1 hour versus the 3 hours. But 1 hour intensely, you're going to use more glucose because it's easier, more readily available. It's easier to free up than oxidizing fat, using it as energy right away. So people look at that and they're like, oh, I'll just do more steady state cardio and I'll burn more fat. Well, no, you burn the same calories. So at the end of the day, the net difference is zero of how you do it. But there is a difference on doing cardio more intensely and doing cardio for prolonged periods of time. If you do cardio for prolonged periods of time, there's a point where so when you start working out, there's a lot of reasons cortisol is released. One of them is working out. One of them, when you exercise, cortisol is gonna dump. the longer you do it, the higher that's going to get, right? Because remember, we talked about it. It's responsible for gluconeogenesis, and it's going to help basically break down muscle tissue and use it as energy, right? So the longer you do it, the more necessary it is to get that energy from other sources, because your body's like, oh, I'm running out of fat, I'm running out of stored glycogen, right? That type of thing. So your body just kind of naturally just does that. So the longer you do it, the higher the cortisol level is going to go. So there's this like window period, and you know, you'll have to look up studies on this to be fully accurate, but I've seen it from different like experts in the field, where they say that 50 minutes to 1 hour window of working out is that ideal time frame, because that's the level. So when you work out, your GH, your growth hormone, it also spikes, but your cortisol spikes at a higher rate. So your growth hormone spikes at a higher rate, but then it starts diminishing and going down. So there's a point where you first start working out, your growth hormone's way up here and your cortisol's way down here. And then as the longer you work out, the more the cortisol is going to get, but the lower the GH is going to get. And eventually the cortisol levels hormones are producing at a higher rate than the growth hormone levels. And so the net benefit becomes lower and lower the longer you do it. So that's one of the main reasons why I'm like, I try to do the lowest amount of cardio for someone when they're exercising, because I know I can net the most lean mass, right? Mm-hmm. And so in Bikini, you have to look at your subject and like how the best approach is for that particular situation. And the problem is a lot of guys and a lot of coaches who are bodybuilders still take a bodybuilding approach to Bikini when it's not the same thing. It's not even the same like sport. They just compete on the same stage. It's not even like in the realm of the same thing. And that's what people still don't understand. And it even comes down to the cardio and stuff, because when bodybuilders, you know, when you have 250 pounds of muscle or 200 pounds of muscle, and a guy that's on all these, you know, super supplements and all these things that are keeping their artificial hormones that they're taking to keep all this muscle, yeah, they can pretty much do anything to keep their muscle, right? But Bikini's not that. They don't do that, right? So it's a different animal. It's a different sport entirely. And you can't take those bodybuilding hardcore approaches and expect a Bikini competitor to keep all her muscle when she's not taking any of these like super enhancement hormones and things like that. So it's just different, and people just don't understand that. And they're just like, oh yeah, I gave 3 hours of cardio to, you know, the 212 and open heavyweight bodybuilder, or, you know, and also to a natty Bikini competitor. I'm like, what do you think's going to happen with you? Think that's the same thing? That's not the same thing. It's just a totally different animal. And so, and I think that with the bodybuilder, with the Bikini, you know, difference, it's going to stress out the Bikini competitor a lot more, that situation, because her body isn't offsetting the natural occurring hormones like the bodybuilder is taking artificially. Right. So it's a different world, you know, and I think that that's why you see a lot, and especially in Bikini, you see a lot of the cream of the crop coaches stay the same. You know, they're like, because I think they've figured out and understand this is a different ball game. You know, it's a different thing. And a lot of them are just becoming more and more just specialized in that one area, that Bikini area only. You know, we're like 90% Bikini now, you know, 85%.
Yeah, I did notice that. It's like these teams you'll see, they have like a major specialty. Yeah. And they might have like a few other classes, but they're known for some class usually. Yeah. So that's definitely true. It is fun. As you just evolve, it kind of naturally picks you know, like I just don't know. It's like its own art form. I mean, Bikini is the most challenging for sure. You know, I mean, well, it's also, as a coach, it's challenging, but it's so fun. And as an athlete, bodybuilding is obviously the most challenging. Yes. Yeah. But as a coach, it's like, there's just so much artistic freedom and so much room to mess up, which is kind of like a scary thing. A lot of unpredictability of like, you know, it's kind of, there's a lot of those like genius or jerk moves, and I'm not afraid of them, but those will stress me out a little bit, like a genius or jerk move, right? Where you're like, well, if we do this show and you win, we're a genius. But if you get third, you're kind of a jerk, right? Like, you shouldn't have done it, right? So it's like you do all these like moves, like, all right, we're going to bring you in leaner, but it might not go good. Like, we're going to push it and see what happens. And then, you know, it could be one of those situations, but it's fun because it allows that artistic freedom. With bodybuilding, it's like, no, let's get you leaner. It doesn't really matter, right? Let's just shred you up as lean as you can get, you know? So I love that about it. I guess if there's any stresses, those ones would be like the highly watched, highly viewed ones where you're like taking gambles. Those ones are probably a little stressful. Those ones get me, but they get my blood going too. Like, you know, are they going to like it? Are they going to hate it? Like, you know, Totally. I agree with that. There's like, yeah, that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
The unpredictability factor. It's literally like anybody's game of bikini. It seems like on any day, if you're just slightly off or you tried something new and it didn't work as good, you know.
I think
like
this year especially it's going to be I mean, honestly, any year in bikini, if you take the 1 through 10 girls, you could probably make an argument in bikini like that any of them could place like higher, lower, or whatever. Like it's just they're so close at the Olympias this year, especially with like, would you say about 70 girls? I mean, that's what it looks like it's going to be at least in the 60s.
When is the cutoff?
I think there's like a couple more weeks. It's like the end of November.
Okay,
at some point.
and we got the point system people coming through,
Yeah.
which I don't know. On point system, if they tie, do they bring them all? Like who tied?
So it's the top 3 in the point system, but if someone were to tie in the point system, at least how it used to be, whoever, like if those 2 competitors placed, let's say, like, so for example, Lana's like in on the point system most likely at this point, but, or let's say, or just use a random person. Let's say a girl named Camille, she got in the point system, but all she did was place 5th all year long, but she's tied for someone who also placed second, third in 4 shows, but this girl did 10 shows and placed 5th and got 1 point. Well, the other girl had a better season in terms of higher placing, so she would win.
Oh.
Yeah, so she would get in.
Interesting.
Kind of cool, right? So they're based on your overall average placement, I guess you'd say.
Totally. So a few other symptoms of stress can also be things like insomnia, making it hard to sleep, depression, affecting your mood, of course. You mentioned the blood sugar issues, weakened immune system, even things like stomach ache, tense muscles, obviously, that one's a pretty given. Like a lot of people hold tension in their necks and stuff when they're stressed. Headache, heartburn, hair loss, acne, dry skin, and even like missed periods. But, I think for our sport, especially, digestion seems to be a big issue. And I think like a lot of people you have digestion issues.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
In our sport, and they don't know why. I mean, even I was kind of like having some digestion issues earlier in the year. But I want to tell you something, guys. I found like a miracle supplement. I'm going to tell you guys the supplement, and now everyone's going to have a flat freaking stomach. Okay. And let me just say something. Freaking magnesium. Oh my gosh. Worked so well for me. So well. And I know magnesium has a lot of benefits, right? And one of those benefits is helping with your digestion and stuff. But I never really looked at it as like a supplement for that reason.
Easy to overlook for that.
Yeah, because it's like on the list of things that it benefits, like it's not something that stands out. I think most people use it for like calming purposes and things like that, and neuromuscular stuff. But I started taking magnesium, and holy moly, am I regular. I have not had any digestion issues since I started taking magnesium. And I'm not saying that's going to like work for everyone, but for me personally, oh my gosh, magnesium was a miracle. Like my digestion has never been better or more predictable. So I love magnesium. If you guys are having issues with your digestion, definitely try it. And it's one of those things too. It usually doesn't work like right away. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna take magnesium tonight and then next morning it's gonna be regular. I feel like it does kind of have to build up a little bit. But man, I love magnesium so much. I just had to share with you guys. Magnesium, it's a miracle.
Yeah, it's weird how some of these things that don't really line up with being the answer end up being the answer. Yeah. Obviously you had some deficiency of some type
maybe
or something.
It could just be me being deficient.
Yeah, because in the bodybuilding world, it's so weird because in the bodybuilding world, it's like the cleanest eaters, and I see like the most issues. Now I do know the high protein diet's a big factor in that, but still, for the most part, these guys are eating really healthy. Like most people that are having these issues are eating really healthy. I think it's just a lot of times they're eating the same foods all the time too, and they'll develop more sensitivities because they're eating the same foods. But it's a strange thing because you'll have someone who's like eating terribly and they're just like, oh, I'm fine.
Well, I think too, we're also hyper aware of our bodies and what's going on in our bodies.
That's a good point.
As bodybuilders, because like if you're overweight, are you going to notice if you're bloated or not? Maybe not.
Yeah, that's true.
Where we're like, were doing the tape measure every week. We're looking at our abs and like we notice if we're like a little bit distended or not, you know? So I think we're super hyper aware of these things because this is our art.
Yeah.
You know, we look at ourselves.
I heard this saying the other day. It was a really cool saying. And went like you're always paying for, is it good? You're always paying for your health. You're either paying for it by the inconvenience of taking care of it through your younger years, or you're paying for not taking care of it through your older years, right? So it's kind of cool. It was a kind of a cool saying to look at. I was like, that is cool because like they're right. You know, if you don't take care of your health in your younger years, you're definitely going to be unhealthy in your over years and pay for it then. You know, so it's kind of cool to hear that. It was one of those quotes that like stuck with me. I was like, that's a smart one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's but it's that's definitely true. I'd rather, obviously take care of it now and look good than have to worry about it so much later. But, it is true though. Like, even though we do eat healthy, there's all these factors that can affect us and maybe things we're not even aware of too. Is like, I think a good example is like, I found out that I was anemic, which means low blood iron, after taking my whole year off from competing in 2017. And you would think like, if any year would be good for like, having the maximum levels of vitamins and everything on point, you think it would be then. But even when I was eating like a normal person, those are quotations, if you guys are just listening, a normal person, I still had like low blood iron. So it's like one of those things. It's like, definitely be aware of your body, but get your labs done just to make sure nothing's going on that could be affecting it. Maybe it's not stress. Maybe it's something you're lacking. Yeah. You never know. So
I do think it's important, especially with how advanced the sport is getting and how much knowledge is like being shared out there now, that everyone really should be. There's really no reason to not get your labs tested and at least see where you're at. Yeah. I mean, you run into some weird situations of things that shouldn't be happening with even younger clients, and I'm like, how does that even happen with you? Like I had a girl the other day. I'll tell you who it is later, but she had her testosterone reading. She was 23, never did anything in her life, never did any PEDs, never did anything, and she was came up as 3 NGDL on her testosterone, like very, very low.
This is Spanish to me.
Yeah,
I have no idea what you're saying.
Like it's below.
So you might want to explain to the viewers because I don't even know what he's talking about.
So it's basically like really close to zero testosterone, like very, very low testosterone for even a female. And I was like, how does that even happen? And then as soon as she got HRT, as soon as she started taking it, like just started growing and sleeping better and being less stressed. And I was like, her mood was better. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like even at your age, huh? Like, cause I started doing my stuff at, like 30-ish, and I kind of expected some of it, to be a little bit off. And it wasn't that bad, but it was bad enough where I should do something about it. And so it was, at any age, and it's not that expensive these days. There's so many clinics that do it now. It's like $200 to get your full labs ran. At least you could see what's under the hood. I always say, you got a beautiful Ferrari, you're taking great care of it, but what if you don't know you have a Toyota engine in there, right? So at least you can make sure you got a Ferrari engine, everything's working good on the Ferrari engine, and you can find things like this, like you're anemic, things like that.
Yeah. And who would have thought, it's not like I was avoiding any foods when I was taking my year off. I was eating more foods than I needed. But still, I think people might just be prone to it. Who knows? But yeah, a little bit more about the digestion issues caused by stress. I just want to read you a little blurb here that might make more sense why your digestion gets affected when you're stressed. So the gut has millions of neurons which can function fairly independently and are constant communication with the brain. Stress can affect the brain to gut communication and may trigger pain, bloating, and other discomfort, and felt more easily. The gut is also inhabited by millions of bacteria, which can influence its health and the brain's health, which can impact the ability to think and affect emotions and all that stuff. So definitely mood related as well. But stress can also affect how quickly food moves through the body, which can cause either diarrhea or most of the time constipation, let's be honest. Furthermore, stress can induce muscle spasms in the bowel, which, maybe cramps or anything else like that, but it can be painful. Stress can affect digestion and what nutrients in the intestines can absorb. and gas production related to nutrient absorption may increase. So a lot of stuff to think about there. So, we're all connected, the mind to the body. And if one thing gets thrown off, it's like, it just kind of throws everything off, it seems, right? So, and ideally you just want your brain and body to be in harmony, and less stress, the better, obviously. But again, there are some forms of good stress, and sometimes that good stress can give you that little kick in the butt to get stuff done. Like, for example, if you're under a time limit for something, you have to turn in a project for work, you might be like, oh, gotta get this done fast. Like, I gotta get working on it. Whereas, like, if you didn't maybe have a time frame to get it done by, you might just be taking your good old time and kind of putting it off to the last minute anyway. But, there are good forms of stress, but also bad forms of stress, obviously. And we want to avoid the bad stress as much as possible, and just, live the happiest life. But I will say, in relation to a contest, easier said than done, because I do this a lot as well. But, sometimes you have to just like convince yourself if you're getting stressed out, right? Let's say before a show, you're getting really stressed out. You're doing everything how you're supposed to be doing, but you're still stressed and maybe even nervous. So those can kind of get a little intertwined sometimes. Just think to yourself, at the end of the day, it's not that serious. Okay. Yeah. You're still going to go home. Your family's going to love you. And you still look better than 99.9% of people walking this earth. And they all wish they could look like you on stage. Just the fact that you had the guts just to get up there shows something, right? So I know, easier said than done. You're still going to get nervous probably, but just think to yourself, like, I've came so far, regardless of what happens. I'm proud of my physique because I gave it everything. Yeah. And that's all I can do. It's out of my hands. And I always say the hay's in the barn, right? The hay's in the barn. So as long as you know you gave your best, and throughout prep you did everything you could to bring the best package possible. You listened to your coach, you followed directions, you did everything according to plan. What happens on stage is a secondary thought, because you did it. You gave it your all. So it's out of your hands. Hay's in the barn. And it's not that serious. Just have fun. Have fun.
Yeah, I think that was a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
That was really good. I think that's a good note to leave off on, actually. Yeah, you killed definitely. That one. Yeah. Hopefully they make a clip out of that one. Maybe. The little clips they make. So anyway, guys, you have any questions that we can answer, any topics that maybe we should discuss that further go into that discussion of stress, or any ads, please leave it in the comments. We always use those for future podcasts. And remember, muscleegg.com/Team Elite Physique. Keep Ashley full of eggs. And then what is the Angels?
Code Ashley K Fit at checkout to save.
There you go. And then make sure that Sassy stays suited.
Yeah, right. Sassy. I think Sassy needs a new suit.
Yes. If you don't use code Ashley K Fit at Angels, it is Sasquatch discrimination, and we are absolutely appalled.
Indeed. That's true.
And offended.
Indeed.
Thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you later.